Greetings, one and all, to the first part of the Rant Anthology. Now this will be a series that details some rants, not necessarily ones that would be significantly associated with what you may think of as a rant. Meaning that they're more so just expressions of the way I see the world, and not so much the issues that I have with it. So I guess you might say that it's not so much a rant. I don't know exactly what you'd call it, but anyways, let's begin. First point is, well, if you look at the part, maybe you can see it. I can't tell. Well, it's referring to meaning. Well, why is it referring to meaning? Well, that's because this first part is going to be about how life has no meaning. Now, I don't really want to give my rationale for that because it's too lengthy, and for the purposes of this, I won't be so much talking about the significance of my belief that life has no meaning, but more so the consequences that it has on others. So maybe I might have a conversation with you in the comments if you want to over why I believe that, but I think it's more important to look over what consequences that has in my opinion. So, first consequence, I'd say, is mostly of the lack of moral guidance for people. Religion and sources of meaning, of a way to describe objective meaning of the universe, has declined pretty much ever since the Enlightenment. So, this has left people with whether conscious or subconscious, a lack of purpose. And as such, the issue becomes that they need to find that purpose elsewhere in order to maintain the illusion that there is some sort of purpose to them. So, what I think happens instead is that through these outside sources, people start lying to themselves using external validation in order to gain something that should be understood internally. They'll start trying to gain the affirmation of others. They're gonna start buying things that they don't need to tell themselves that they're doing better. And even altruism is an expression of this, as when you give something to someone else, you can say, I feel good about myself. But is that really coming from you? Is that really a meaningful connection? Is that a meaningful amount of contentment with yourself? Or is it something temporary? Is it a temporary gain that doesn't actually really mean much? What you're doing is you're just, what everyone tries to do, and what I believe is the greatest good, is to pursue the greatest good. However, some pursuals of the greatest good do not result in the meaningful contentment that people desire. And that's pretty much what I've been saying beforehand. So, how can one achieve the meaningful contentment that all humans desire without the existence of objective meaning in the universe? Well, you have to find the idea of good as it exists to the individual, and then pursue that. It doesn't matter what that is, but I believe that the greatest thing that anyone can pursue is a pursuit of truth. It's something that ties a meaningful individual world and the study of how to create contentment to a meaningless outer world, and it meshes those together. So ultimately, the study of truth is the greatest good. This is, however, not to say that good is something that naturally exists. It's not a collective idea. It's an individual thing. It's based on the perspective of the individual as we live, because as we live our lives from only the perspective of us, the individual. Us, the individual. That's kind of oxymoronic, isn't it? Us, the individual. Or I suppose that brings me to my next point, that the search for meaning and the need for personal importance drives collective thought. All the time, people with little personal power will attempt to lash out against others through the use of the detachment of their individual self. They place their consciousness effectively within the hands of a collective, and then they use that to lash out at why are they discontent, because they are unable to perceive the fact that they are unable to cope with the nihilistic nature of the universe. And as such, they again lash out violently or somehow against those who they perceive as a threat. Now, ultimately, the way to acknowledge meaninglessness and be content is the idea of Stoicism, and not the modern day warped definition of Stoicism wherein it's a person that just doesn't show emotion. I'm talking more of the ancient version of Stoicism, wherein no matter what the external condition, the individual may seek solace within the mind of their own head. Mind of their own head, redundant, but I'm doing most of this in one take. This is currently my second take, so who really cares? It's more of a rant, so it doesn't really matter what I say. In fact, I could just sit here in silence for a while. So, what's my final advice to you, the viewer? Figure out what you're dependent on and break from it. Because dependence on an external source ultimately breeds discontent as you seek that thing out continuously, only for you to lie to yourself that one thing that you're dependent on is actually bringing you contentment, when in reality you're just as discontent as anyone else. Thank you. Bye.